And now I would like to introduce really a most extraordinary young woman, Noor Nabris, from Palestine, near Jerusalem, has been studying at the University of Minnesota, working on her master's degree. And we are so lucky to have her because she's leaving us in 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, to go back home to Jerusalem. So with that, I would like you to welcome Noor Nabris.
Well, thank you, Kathy, and good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me well?
Yes.
Yes?
Microphone near your mouth.
Okay. Is this better now?
That's better.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, again. So like Kathy said, my name is Noor, and I'm from Jerusalem. I came here last year because I wanted to do my master's here at the U, and I will be going back home in 2 weeks now. And why I'm doing this right now, because I kind of noticed that not a lot of people here know a lot about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And a lot of people here are, like the media here plays a big role, not showing the truth or what is going on, or what is really going on over there. So this is why I decided to speak here today, to show you some of the things that you might not hear about in the media. So my outline for today, I will start by a short introduction about how the conflict started, and then I will talk about the main challenges based on the area of living. So first we'll start with Jerusalem, and then the West Bank, and finally with Gaza. Before I move on with my presentation, I would like to clarify two misconceptions that a lot of people might get confused with that. So the first one is, some people think that it is a religious conflict. The Palestinian-Israeli conflict is a religious one, while it's not. Even though they try to show that it's a conflict between Muslims and Jews, and it's not. It's a political one, and religion doesn't have a lot to do with that. The second misconception is that it is a conflict between two equal powers fighting each other, and again, it is not. It is not two equal powers fighting each other. It's an oppressor, and it's the ones that are being oppressed. And I will explain what I mean by this while I move on with the presentation. How did the conflict start? I will show you this short movie, and then...
What would happen if you built a refuge for persecuted people in a place where another people already lived? In the next few minutes, you'll learn why this moral quandary is at the root of the struggle between Israelis and Palestinians. First, there are a couple of things it's helpful to understand. One, many Jews fled harsh persecution in anti-Semitic Europe, especially the Nazi Holocaust. Zionists encouraged massive immigration to historic Palestine, at that time a British colony, where Jews had an age-old connection and where small Jewish communities had long existed among larger groups of indigenous peoples. But when the UN offered the Jewish immigrants the majority of the land for a new state called Israel, for the indigenous Palestinians who lived there, it was a massive destruction of life. They rejected the UN's partition plan, and several Arab states invaded the new state of Israel. Israeli forces essentially erased over 400 Palestinian villages and towns. By the end of the fighting, Israel controlled 78% of historic Palestine. And when 750,000 Palestinians who fled or were expelled during fighting tried to return to their homes where the new state now stood, they were permanently barred by the Israeli government. Well over 100,000 of their relatives and neighbors who hadn't left became second-class citizens of the new state, along with the new Jewish majority. Today, Palestinian refugees and their descendants number in the millions. Most are in the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and Jordan. Many are spread throughout the world, with millions still living in refugee camps, seeking to return to their homeland. To sum up, one group of refugees found a much-needed home, but in the process, a new group of refugees was created. Here's the second thing to understand. Israel was founded as a Jewish state, but now ask yourself, what exactly does that mean? People have lots of ideas about what a Jewish state should look like. Some call for equality for all citizens. But what was created in practice was institutional discrimination against non-Jews. In other words, Israel ended up being built on a blueprint of exclusion. The Israeli government wants maximum land and resources for Jews, but not the Palestinians living there. That's why, inside Israel, Jews get special privileges, including rights to land and housing, that are denied to the Palestinian citizens, who make up 20% of Israel's population. That's also part of why Israel has never defined its borders. In fact, they still hold on to land, the West Bank and Gaza, that they conquered in the war in 1967. Since then, Israel has built Jewish settlements throughout the occupied West Bank, building Jewish-only cities and supplying them with infrastructure like roads and army camps, schools, and even a college. Military occupations are meant to be temporary, but after 40 plus years, this one looks permanent and entirely unjust. In the West Bank, Israeli Jewish settlers and Palestinians live on the same land, but must live under two completely separate and unequal systems of Israeli law. The Jewish settlers dominate the natural resources, including water and agricultural land, and they're backed by the Israeli army. To maintain the occupation, Israel has demolished thousands of Palestinian homes and orchards, confiscated Palestinian land, bombed a captive civilian population in Gaza, and punished resistance with raids, arrests, and assassinations, all to gain maximum land, while making life so difficult for Palestinians that they will either leave or be too afraid to resist. Palestinians have fought back. For decades, they tried to achieve national liberation through armed struggle. Some groups still do. But the majority now support popular protest instead. The deeply harmful pattern of control, repression, and violence profoundly harms Palestinians living under occupation and Israelis living as occupiers. This must be broken to reach a peaceful and secure future for both peoples. Now that you understand the problem, what about the solution? What about peace talks? So far, over 2 decades of U.S.-backed peace talks have actually made things worse by helping Israel continue the occupation. It's been years of talking while Israel massively expanded the Jewish settlements and literally redrew the map. Peace talks are good if they're real, but not when they're theater to cover a land grab. So now what? The current world superpower, the United States, has been a terrible friend, enabling Israel's destructive and self-destructive expansion onto Palestinian land by funding the Israeli military, the biggest recipient of U.S. foreign aid in the world. But there's another superpower that can make the difference.
So I will stop the video here so I can move on with my presentation. So this is mainly a summary about how the conflict started and how it looks like right now. And this is what I will cover now in my presentation. So in the next 1 hour and 15 minutes, I will try to tell you about everything that is going on over there, and let's see if we'll be able to do it. How does it look like today? So, you know, this is the West Bank and this is Gaza, but now with the wall, the settlements, everything, this is how it looks like today. The green area is the Palestinian area, while the other is under Israeli control. But what does that mean? So, I don't know if you've seen this before. This is the blue ID. It is the blue ID is the Israeli ID, and the green is the Palestinian ID. But again, going back to the map, what does that mean? So Palestinians who live in the West Bank and Gaza hold the Palestinian ID. Palestinians who live in Jerusalem and inside Israel hold the Israeli ID. Again, what does that mean? It means that if you live in the West Bank or Gaza, you are not allowed to be in Israel. You are not allowed to go to Jerusalem. You are not allowed to have a freedom of movement. It's different for people who live in Gaza, and I will explain that as I move on with the presentation. Why I decided to talk about Jerusalem, the West Bank, and Gaza today, because basically you get treated based on your area of living, and the challenges that you face are also based on your area of living. So people who live in Jerusalem face different challenges than people who live in the West Bank, even though we are all Palestinians, but it is different situation for everyone. Just a quick demographics. So total area of Palestine is 27,000 kilometers square. The residents of Jerusalem, number of Israeli Jews is 497,000 people. Number of Palestinians who live in Jerusalem is 360,000 people. That makes 38% of total population of the population of people who live in Jerusalem. Why is Jerusalem always in H? I will show you another movie and then I will talk about it.
Jerusalem, holy to Muslims, Christians, and Jews, and a flashpoint in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's a tale of two cities, Israeli majority West Jerusalem and Palestinian majority East Jerusalem, occupied by Israel since 1967. Even though the rest of the world disagrees, Israel says both East and West are one, its eternal, undivided capital. But it treats the people who live there very differently. Does that cause tension? You bet. It starts at birth. If you're an Israeli Jew born in Jerusalem, you get Israeli citizenship. But if you're a Palestinian, you only get a residency permit, even if your family's been there for generations. And Israel can take that permit away at any time for a bunch of different reasons. One is if you live outside Jerusalem for 7 years, you lose your right to go back. And if you marry another Palestinian from the occupied West Bank or Gaza, they can't live in Jerusalem with you. Your choice? Live apart or leave. Since 1967, 14,000 Palestinians have lost their Jerusalem residencies. Then there's the housing crisis. 35% of East Jerusalem has been zoned for the construction of illegal settlements, while only 13% has been set aside for Palestinians, much of it already built up. So as their families grow, some resort to building illegally. That's where home demolitions come in. Since 1967, Israel has demolished around 2,000 Palestinian homes in East Jerusalem for being built without permits, which are hard to get. And there are up to 20,000 outstanding demolition orders. At the same time, Israel has bulldozed ahead with the construction of settlements for its Jewish population in violation of international law. Over 200,000 settlers live in East Jerusalem. Some, guarded by soldiers and police, have kicked out Palestinians and moved into their homes. But most live in a ring of settlements that, along with a separation wall, cut off the city from the occupied West Bank and the Palestinians that live there. That isolation has devastated East Jerusalem's economy. Around 75% of Palestinians in Jerusalem live below the poverty line versus 22% for Israeli Jews. And while Palestinians pay about half of the city's taxes, they receive a tiny part of the municipal budget, leaving many neighborhoods without adequate roads, schools, and services. What about the holy sites? Well, that's where things often heat up, especially at the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. Israel's policy only allows Muslims to pray there, but Jews, who call it the Temple Mount, believe it's the site where 2 biblical temples once stood, and some have gone there demanding access to pray. That's ignited clashes and protests, which Israeli authorities have tried to contain by banning younger Muslim men from entering the compound. But that only seems to make things worse. That's a snapshot of Jerusalem. Is it any wonder the city's on edge?
Okay, so I will give you now some numbers about some of the things that were mentioned in the video, and I will expand on other things. So first, poverty rate: 78% of Palestinians in Jerusalem live below the poverty line. So like I said, Palestinians who live in Jerusalem, they hold the Israeli ID, but it is not considered citizenship. It is only Palestinians who live there are treated as residents and not citizens, which means that this Jerusalem ID can be taken away from them at any time if they do certain things. And one of that is to marry someone from the West Bank or Gaza, and I will talk about that in a bit. The other one is to live outside the country for more than 7 years. And the third situation, if you apply for a citizenship in any other country. So for me, I'm here in the States. If I apply to get the American passport, and if I was granted that, then I will lose the right to go back to Jerusalem or any passport of any country. So if I marry someone and like someone that is not Palestinian, and I apply to get a passport, then I can't go back to Jerusalem. And since 1967, 14,000 Palestinians have lost the Jerusalem ID. And this is according to the law, the Israel Supreme Court. They decided that this is the law for the entry into Israel. If you want to talk about planning and building, so the total area for Palestinians that are allowed to build on is considered 17% of Jerusalem, and only 13% of Jerusalem housing units were granted. Only 13% of Jerusalem housing units granted building permits were in Palestinian neighborhood. The rest were not in Palestinian neighborhoods. So in 1967, Israel annexed 70,000 dunams in East Jerusalem and the West Bank, and later they decided to do building plans for these areas. And they decided that 40% of that area that was annexed after 1967 as open landscape areas. So the 40% of the land that were annexed by Israel in 1967 in East Jerusalem and the West Bank, they were considered as open landscape areas, which no one is allowed to build there. So yeah, this is why 1/3 of that territory is considered 1/3 of that area is owned by Arabs. The other is either landscape areas that is forbidden to build, or they don't allow the building on that area. So this is why Palestinians who live in East Jerusalem, if you happen to be there, you can notice that different neighborhoods are they live in a really dense population. They suffer from overcrowdedness because they are not allowed to build in a lot of different areas over there. And by the end of 2001, 46,000 housing units have been built for Jews on the same area that I'm talking about, but not even one unit for Palestinians. I will go through that really quick because I want to go through other things. So this also applies to some places in the West Bank as well, not only in Jerusalem. Yeah, like I said, I will go through that really quick. But this is why. So basically, Palestinians are not given permits to build houses in East Jerusalem. So therefore, Palestinians decide to build without permits, and then this is where house demolitions come from. So you see this guy, for example, what is he doing over here? It is not renovation. So Israel gives the option for Palestinians who don't live, who build without permits, so they give them the option. So either you demolish that by yourself, or we will come and demolish that for you. But if we come and demolish that for you, we will send you a bill for the people who came and demolished your house, for the bulldozers who came, for the police that came and guarded those people. So this is why some people, some Palestinians who get a demolition order decide to do that by themselves, to build their own homes by themselves, because if they don't do that, they will end up paying at least 50,000 shekels, almost $15,000. And this is the least amount that they pay for that. According to Beit Salem, this is the number, the numbers of houses that were demolished over from 2004 to 2014. What about services? So also Palestinians who live in Jerusalem pay the same amount of taxes as any Israeli Jew who live in Jerusalem as well. But do they get the same services? No. So for example, in West Jerusalem, there are 1,000 public parks. In East Jerusalem, there are 45. In West Jerusalem, there are 34 swimming pools. In East Jerusalem, there are 3. In West Jerusalem, there are 26 libraries. In East Jerusalem, there are 2. In West Jerusalem, there are 531 sports facilities. In East Jerusalem, they have 33. There is a shortage in 1,000 classrooms in East Jerusalem, and there are more than 6,000 Palestinians who are out of the educational system because of that. There is 6 kindergartens in East Jerusalem and 66 in West Jerusalem. So the dropout rate for 12th grades in East Jerusalem is 40%, and this is for a bunch of different reasons. It can be related to educational and economic at the same time. And most of the professions, 25% of Palestinians are employed in hotels or restaurants. So there are also 64% of households that are not connected to city water. And there is shortage of some 50 kilometers of sewage pipes. And these are mainly in neighborhoods that were cut, like when the wall was built. There are different neighborhoods that were considered like part of East Jerusalem that they were cut off the wall. And this is why they don't get any kind of services. And this is why sometimes they have to actually go and fill like tanks with water and take them back home because they are not connected to water supplies. If we want to talk about the movement, so in East Jerusalem, it's cut from the West Bank through different things like checkpoints, the wall. And the wall cut 90,000 people, 90,000 Palestinians from different neighborhoods. Like I said, they were part of East Jerusalem. After they built the wall, they were left on the other side, and this is why they don't get any kind of services. They go through checkpoints every day. They pay the same amount of taxes, but at the same time, they don't get anything in return. Also, if you want to talk about hospitals, because of the checkpoints and the wall, so people who come to get treated in hospitals from the West Bank and other places, they are not always granted permits to go to hospitals, and this is why it drops from 69 to 29%. So how does a checkpoint look like? I will walk you through one when it's empty. So this is Kalandia's checkpoint. It's the checkpoint that separates Jerusalem from the West Bank. So everyone has to walk through this. And people who are allowed to enter are residents of Jerusalem and Palestinians who live in the West Bank that have special permits. Everyone gets searched, everyone has to show their ID. If you forget your ID that day, you're not going home, and unless someone gives you that, brings you that.
Going on the other side now.
Yeah, so basically this is how it looks like when it's kind of nice, when there is no one over there, but it is not always like this. Mainly this is how it looks like most of the time. A lot of people will be stuck, and like you said, the search over there is similar to a search of an airport. You have to put your stuff in the scanner, you have to walk through a metal detector and show the Israeli soldiers your ID in order for you to pass. And sometimes you might wait for an hour, sometimes even more. It depends on your luck. If you're lucky, then you'll find it empty, just like the video. But if you're not, this is what you have to go through. Before going through the West Bank, I will share with you, since I'm a resident of Jerusalem, I will share with you my own personal story. So I lived in Jerusalem my whole life. Like I said, there are certain situations that your Jerusalem ID might be threatened, that it might be taken away from you. So my dad is originally from Gaza. My mom is from the West Bank. My mom is from Jerusalem, I'm sorry. My dad is from Gaza. My mom is from East Jerusalem. So they met at the university and decided to get married. And after that, so my dad wasn't allowed to be in Jerusalem. And if my mom lived in the West Bank, then she will lose her Jerusalem ID, and they didn't want to do that. So, a tough decision to make. What did they do? My mom and us, so we are 4, I have 3 other siblings. My mom and us, we stayed, growing up as kids, this is what we went through as a family. And we used to go visit my dad in the weekends. So my mom lived the life of a single mom, while she's not. And we had to grow up without my dad being around, because he just couldn't be there, because it's not his option. He can't live in Jerusalem. And it is not like you do like this and that's it. You have to provide documents that you live in Jerusalem, phone bills, electricity bills, that we go to schools in Jerusalem as well. I mean, you can't just, for example, live in Jerusalem and say, okay, so I just rented a house and I can do whatever I want right now. It's not that simple, because you have to give them proof that you actually live there. And it is not only the challenge of location, to live in 2 separate houses. It was a really hard time for my mom, because she had to take care of 2 houses at the same time. She didn't drive. My mom doesn't have a driving license. She had to either call a taxi or take us in public transportation from East Jerusalem to Ramallah with 4 kids. So when we used to go in the weekends, we had to take our school books with us. We had to take our clothes with us. We had to, basically to pack for 2 days and to leave. And then a lot of times, some of us will just forget, for example, I don't know, a certain book and remember that I have an exam tomorrow when we are in Ramallah, after we leave. So I have an exam tomorrow and I don't have my book. So my mom had to go back and bring that again and come back again. Like I said, it was a tough time because even, my dad couldn't participate in a lot of, school events. He just couldn't be there because he's not allowed to enter Jerusalem. He had to miss a lot of things, a lot of family gathering. And till this moment, even when we speak about a lot of things, he doesn't know what we're talking about. Like when we remember certain things of our childhood, he doesn't know that. He wasn't there most of the time because he just couldn't. Today it doesn't stop here. Today I'm engaged and my fiance, he's from Bethlehem, which is in the West Bank. So we had to take this tough decision, are we ready to go through all of that? Because I know what that means. I've seen that. I know what my mom had to go through and what we as kids went through and what my dad went through. But at the same time, can you control who to love? Can you decide, okay, I want my fiancé to be, or the man that I love to be from Jerusalem with a Jerusalem ID? Or is it a criteria that you have to beg for? Oh, please God, let him have a blue ID so I won't go through a lot of things. You just can't control that. It is not that we are letting the political situation control who you love, who you marry, where you live. I know how that sounds. I know it will be challenging. I know it will be tough. But at the same time, we decided to go through all of that, regardless of what it takes. And now a lot of you asked me, what kind of passport do I have? I don't have any kind of passport. The only thing that I get is an Israeli travel document because I'm not a citizen of Jerusalem. I'm just a resident of Jerusalem. So this is what they give for residents of Jerusalem, only an Israeli travel document. It is not even a passport. And this can be taken the Jerusalem ID at any time if certain things, the situations that I just told you about. So for us, even if we want to travel, even if we want to go someplace, even if we want to go on our honeymoon, he has to travel from one place and I have to go to another place. So I only travel through the Tel Aviv, the Ben Gurion's airport, and since he's from the West Bank, he's not allowed to use that airport. So he goes to Jordan, and then he travels to his destination. So imagine that we're going on our honeymoon and we have to meet in our final destination. And even when we want to come back, so we spend some time over there and then each one of us go from different place and then we meet again at Palestine. So yeah, this is mainly a brief snapshot of my life, how it was. I can talk about this forever, but I really want you to know about other things. So I will move forward with this. Talking about the West Bank, quick demographics again. Number of Palestinians living in the West Bank is almost 300,000 people. Number of Israeli settlers living, million. Almost 2,307,000. Okay, I don't know. I just mixed up with numbers. Okay, it's 2,700,000 people, and number of Israeli settlers living there, it's 350,000 people inside the West Bank. So the West Bank is divided into 3 areas according to the Oslo Convention. The Oslo Convention was signed in 1994, but the thing about this convention is that they said that it's going to be for 5 years, like a temporary convention for 5 years, and after that, a Palestinian state will be established. And now 20 years have passed. Still the same situation. So the first area is Area A, which makes 18% of total area of the West Bank. The area, it is under civil administration and security control for the Palestinian Authority. The Area B is it's under civil administration control for Palestinian Authority, but security control of Israel, and it makes 18.3% of total area of the West Bank. Area C, it is under control of Israel, administrative and security control, which makes 61% of the West Bank. So what does that mean? Even housing and planning in the West Bank in Area C, it is designed, it is planned based on so it is designed to serve Israel's own needs, own developmental needs, and this is how they legislate the rules. Settlements in the West Bank, this is a short video that I will skip. If we have more time, I'll just come back to it. It talks about the settlements that they were built in the West Bank. So according to the international law, these settlements are illegal, and it is not only settlements and that's it. Settlements, the roads that are built for the Israeli use, that some Palestinians are banned from using these roads. Like they have their own, the whole infrastructure is connected to Israel. Again, if we have more time, I'll just play that for you. If not, then I will go back. Like, we'll see if I can go back to it or not. So Palestinians are prohibited from building on 70% of Area C. And from 2002 till 2010, only 176 construction permits were issued to Palestinians, and at least 15,000 residential units were built for settlements use. So even when, like I said, even when they build the settlements, they build that, they create parks, they create public spaces, they create roads for them, and not for Palestinians who live there. And also, even though it's in the West Bank, some people might think that, okay, the West Bank, it's under the Palestinian control and that's it. It's not like that. Even Palestinians who live in the West Bank, they go through a lot of housing demolitions, they go through checkpoints, they have a really stressful lives. So from 2006 till 2015, Israel demolished at least 927 residential units with almost 4,000 people left homeless. And these are the numbers according to years, like how many housing units were demolished and how many people left homeless because of Israel's policy in the West Bank. Again, people who live in the West Bank, they also don't get enough services in Area C. So there are more than 48,000 Palestinians who live in the West Bank in Area C that are not connected to any water supply network. These people have to go, like I said, purchase the water so they can use it. In some areas, in some communities, the average consumption, the average consumption for a person is under 60 liters. And in other neighborhoods, in Jordan Valley, for example, it's under 20 liters. And according to the WHO, it should be around 130 liters per person. So you can see the difference between that. So yeah, this is what they basically have to do. They have to fill up buckets. They have to find a way to transfer the water to their homes. Again, restriction of movement. They go through checkpoints. They go through a lot of lack of freedom of movement. So in 2015, there were 96 fixed checkpoints in the West Bank. 39 of those were the last inspection before entering Israel. And so these are the numbers per years. It is not only like these fixed checkpoints and that's it. There are flying checkpoints and that also. What do flying checkpoints mean? It means that any soldier can stop at any way and make a checkpoint and start searching people. So it is not only that you know that there is a checkpoint here, there is a checkpoint here. You can, like, this can be made at any time, a checkpoint, a flying checkpoint. So, for example, 2014, there were 456 flying checkpoints, and you can see the numbers. Forbidden roads, like I said, there are different roads that are allowed for Israeli settlers to use, but Palestinians are banned from using these roads. And in March 2015, there were almost 60 kilometers of roads in the West Bank that Israel has classified for sole use of Israelis, and that Palestinians are prohibited from using that. And I will show you an example of one of these roads. It's in Hebron. It's a city in the West Bank.
ايش بدهم يعملوا هون الجيش؟ بدهم يعملوا سوق بس مش سوق بطون جدار. ايش نظيف وجديد وسط 200 او متر ونص من الجدار قد ما نقدر نعمل عشان يكون ممر زي رصيف او ممر. معناته هذا الممر بيكون مفتوح من هون لفوق بيكون مفتوح.
ايش اخوك لابوت اخوك في لابوت على شيء يلا نعم كذا ما تقول لي كذا.
This is one example, and there are a lot of examples like this. The wall, I'm sure you all heard about it. So Israel calls it the security fence. Palestinians call it the apartheid wall. This is how it looks like. It's 8 meters high. Israel decided to build that in 2002. But the thing is, 80% of the route of this barrier is not on the green line, like the border between Israel and the West Bank. It actually goes inside the West Bank. In fact, the length of the wall is twice the length of the borders of the West Bank. So total area affected by the wall is 670,000 dunams, and the full route of separation barrier, it makes, after being completed, 709 kilometers long. So 60% of the wall has been completed until now, and it costs $2 billion. So I will show you an example of a city called Qalqilia. So here, if you can notice with me, this is the green line, and this is the border between the West Bank and Israel. But if you can see the route of the wall, it actually goes inside. So again, here's the border, and here's where the wall goes into. So like I said, the length of the wall is like twice the length of the borders of the West Bank. The city of Qalqilia, as an example, it's surrounded by the wall from 3 different areas. And now you can see that if someone lives here, they used to go like this to Qalqilia. They have to go all the way. Economic effects. So there are a lot of lands that have been confiscated. So it's not that it was built inside the West Bank on a land that is no one's land. A lot of farmers were denied access to their farms. A lot of lands were confiscated, and more than 124 dunams were requisitioned for separation wall construction. 60,000 Palestinians lost their jobs in Israel because they were unable to get permits. Because, like I said, once you live in the West Bank, you can't leave without using a checkpoint. And when you use a checkpoint, you have to provide either an ID that allows you to be there or to have a special permit so you can enter. The number of permits allowing farmers to work on their lands that was cut off by the barrier dropped by 83% from 2006 to 2009. So during the same period, Israel extended the amount of Palestinian land that remained west of the barrier by 30% to approximately of 116 dunams. And the agriculture and water sectors are fallen by 22.8%. And it's not like confiscating land. If there are wells in those lands, they are confiscated as well. If there are any resources, they go with the land. So effects on education of the wall. So there are a lot of cities or a lot of villages that they don't have certain schools. They only have, for example, elementary schools. They don't have secondary schools, or they don't have universities. Of course, you have to leave from one place to another, and the wall made it more difficult for those people to go from one place to another to pursue their education. And when it was built, some people before it was completed, some people have to actually go through the wall to get from one place to another. Okay. Now Gaza. Okay. So before moving on. Well, okay, let's move on. I was thinking if I should play the video about the settlements or not, but let's move on. If you have more time, I'll just do that. Again, some quick demographics. So Gaza is the most dense population, one of the most dense population on Earth. So there are 1,076,000 Palestinians who live in Gaza, and in a total area of 365 kilometers square, which is almost 141 square miles. So there are almost 2 million people who live there in this small area. So life in Gaza, this is how it looks like.
Gaza, with more than 1.7 million people living there, this tiny strip of land is one of the most densely populated areas in the world and one of the worst places to live. It's been called the world's largest open-air prison. Here's why. Gaza has been home to a majority refugee population since 1948, when Israel declared its statehood and forced hundreds of thousands of Palestinians out of their homes. Many fled to the Gaza Strip. For decades, Israel has controlled Gaza by air, land, and sea, regulating what goes in and what goes out. When the Palestinian party Hamas won parliamentary elections in 2006, Israel intensified its siege and collective punishment of the Palestinian people living there. That's because Israel considers Hamas a terrorist organization, even though to some Palestinians, it's a legitimate resistance movement. Israel's blockade of Gaza has been condemned by the UN as a violation of international law. It's cut off Palestinians from the rest of the world and made life in Gaza pretty unbearable. 80% of the population is dependent on aid. It's no surprise then that more than 50% of households lack enough food for their families. Water is also a huge problem, with more than 90% of Gaza's water unsafe for drinking. Water treatment plants need spare parts and fuel, both rare resources to operate. Medicine and doctors are also in short supply, and only those with immediately life-threatening conditions are allowed to travel out of Gaza for healthcare, if they're lucky. It doesn't help that Egypt also keeps a very tight border with Gaza, heavily limiting who comes in and out. Infrastructure has also suffered. Basic items like cement, gravel, and steel are largely banned from entering Gaza. That's because Israel says they could be used to make weapons. So basically, Gaza can't build enough to keep up with its growing population. There are also frequent power outages due to fuel shortages for up to 12 hours a day. And Gaza's economy? It's paralyzed. Israel limits Gaza's exports to only 1 truckload of goods per day. Its unemployment rate is one of the highest in the world at nearly 40%. Israel has also launched several large attacks on Gaza. The thing is, with such a densely populated area, no one is safe. Israel says these operations are in response to the indiscriminate firing of rockets by armed Palestinian groups in Gaza. But many have pointed out that the effects of these attacks are disproportionate. The worst bombardment came during Israel's 3-week-long offensive that began in December 2008, called Operation Cast Lead. More than 1,400 Palestinians were killed and thousands more were wounded. Much of Gaza's infrastructure was destroyed. Then in November 2012, an 8-day operation killed 133 people. One airstrike alone took out 12 people in one family, including 5 children. And the Israeli bombardments continue to this day. That's a glimpse of life in Gaza. And for a generation of young Palestinians who've never been able to leave, it's all they know. So the next time you see Gaza in the headlines, don't forget what you just heard.
What you just heard. What you just heard.
Or what you just heard. Thank you.
Yeah. So Gaza has been, Israel had Gaza under siege since 2006. And of course, what does that mean? It means that it controls who goes in, who goes out, and what goes in and what goes out. So, and it also controls the airspace and the territorial water. So, for example, Israel allows fishermen to use only 3 miles of water, and this is one of the demands of Gazans, that one of their biggest demand is to lift the siege so they can live in dignity. Gaza's airport, so they had an airport, it was bombarded in 2000. So even before Hamas was in the picture, because this is one of their claims, that Hamas is a terrorist organization, and this is why we do all of that, to protect ourselves. But the bombarding started 6 years or even more before Hamas won the elections and before Hamas became in the picture. So the first operation, Operation Cast Lead, it started December 27th and until January 18th. So in this operation, in this assault on Gaza, 1,300 Palestinians were killed. Of these, 318 were minors under the age of 18. More than 5,000 people were wounded, and 350 they were wounded seriously. Of course, this was the first operation on Gaza, and it caused enormous damage on the dwellings, buildings, infrastructure. So, for example, one of the things that Israel bombarded in this operation was the water system and the electricity system. So this is why 50% of population, they are not connected now to water supplies, and 55% of the electricity systems were destroyed. According to UN figures, Israel destroyed more than 3,500 residential dwellings, and 20,000 people were left homeless. So again, 581 organizations were either partially destroyed or completely destroyed, and this includes UN organizations, health institutes, and ambulances. 29 ambulances were destructed. So 39 industrial facilities were shut down. More than 40,000 people lost their jobs. So I'm talking about a really densely populated area. Like one airstrike will leave a dramatic impact on the population. 695 commercial facilities were destroyed, either partially or completely. And the rate of poverty was raised to 79%. So 88% after this operation applies, and it can last to up to 12 hours a day. Imagine how would your day look like if you didn't have electricity for 12 hours. In the meanwhile, rockets fired to Israel killed 3 Israeli civilians and 1 member of the Israeli security forces, and wounded dozens. 9 soldiers were killed within the Gaza Strip, 4 by friendly fire, and more than 100 soldiers were wounded, 1 critically and 20 moderately to seriously. The second operation is Operation Pillar of Defense. This operation stayed for a week, 7 days. And in those 7 days, 167 Palestinians were killed. 80% of those who were killed, they were killed in the last 4 days of the operation. Also in the same period, the period of a week, the rockets that were fired from Gaza, they killed 4 Israelis. Operation Protective Edge, this is the last one. It happened in 2014, right before I came here to the States. I will show you a short video about that, and then I will give you numbers.
It's been 1 year since Israel began the 51-day war on Gaza. It called Operation Protective Edge. By the end, more than 2,200 Palestinians Palestinians were killed, the vast majority civilians. On the Israeli side, 73 people were killed, 67 of them soldiers. This densely populated tiny strip of land that's been called an open-air prison saw a level of destruction that was unprecedented. So, 1 year on, how is Gaza doing? The short answer, not well.
طبعا الحياة بغزة كتير صعبة، إنه في ناس كتير ودعوا أبنائهم، في عائلات كتير اتدمرت.
ولا السوق ماشي، ولا في بيع ولا في شراء. السنة مضرب الحرب ولا عمار ولا صار حاجة.
خايف ترجع الحرب كمان مرة، وعشان يعني الوضع يتأثر في ناس لهجات مصابين من الحرب اللي قبلها. خايفين ترجع الحرب.
Life in Gaza is pretty much hopeless for the 1.8 million people who live there. They're walled in by the Israeli army to the north and east, the Israeli navy to the west, and the Egyptian army to the south. People aren't allowed to leave, and few can go in. This siege has meant that less than 1% of the construction materials needed for rebuilding has been allowed in. 100,000 Palestinians remain homeless after 18,000 homes were either destroyed or severely damaged. At this rate, it would take 100 years for Gaza to be rebuilt, assuming there aren't any more wars. And the billions of dollars in aid pledged by foreign governments have, for the most part, remained, well, pledges. The economy is in shambles. Exports are virtually banned, and imports are very limited. According to the World Bank, Gaza has the highest unemployment rate in the world. Some people have resorted to selling the rubble of their destroyed homes to make a bit of money. Poverty is so widespread that nearly 80% of the population needs aid or food assistance just to get by. Then there are the emotionally shattered, Gaza's children. Most of them have never been able to leave and have now endured 3 wars in 6 years. In last year's war, some 551 kids were killed in Gaza and more than 3,400 were injured. And even though the war is technically over, their trauma isn't. 3 in 4 kids show signs of severe emotional distress, including regular bedwetting and nightmares. So, given all the lives lost and homes, schools, and hospitals destroyed, who's been held accountable? No one. In some instances, the Israeli military has investigated itself and then cleared itself of any wrongdoing. This includes the attack that killed 4 young boys playing soccer on the beach. More recently, a UN report found that both Israel and Palestinian militant groups may have committed war crimes. That report is headed to the International Criminal Court, and a case might be brought against the Israeli leadership. But in terms of accountability in the short term, there's not much reason to be optimistic. Meanwhile, Gaza's residents are living amid the rubble and despair, wondering how much more they'll have to endure.
So again, this is a summary about the last operation. I'm on a scholarship program here to study, and there were 4 people who were granted the same scholarship. They were from Gaza. So we were 12 from the West Bank and another 4 from Gaza. So the 12 of us could leave. We went and we did the visa interview, and we left, and we came here last August. For the people who from Gaza, the 4 people who are from Gaza, they couldn't leave because at the time that we did the visa interview, they were under the assault, and when at that period of time when this happens, Israel closes the border. It's usually closed, but even when you have like special permit that allows you to be out, they even close that. No one goes in, no one goes out. And the Egyptian side, the Rafah border was closed at that time, so they couldn't leave to do the visa interview. So this is why my friend and like the 4 other people from Gaza, they came a semester late because they couldn't make it the first semester because they couldn't leave to do their visa interview. And this is why, so one of my friends that are from Gaza, she's here in Minnesota, and we went to the same, we are in the same program together. So the thing is, we both knew that we were granted the scholarship because I'm from Jerusalem and she's from Gaza. We couldn't meet before, we couldn't meet in Palestine. We met here when she came in January. And now, since I'm graduating and going back home, and she will be going back home next semester, so we will not be able to meet in Palestine. So it's easier for us to meet here in the States than to meet when she's 1 hour away from me. Operation Protective Edge, it started in July 8th and lasted for 50 days. During that time, 2,200 Palestinians were killed, 530 children, and 302 women were killed. 5 Israeli civilians and 67 Israeli soldiers were killed in the fighting. About 18,000 homes were destroyed, and more than 100,000 Palestinians were left homeless. So again, when these assaults happen, everything is destroyed. Different homes, facilities, factories, centers, organizations are destroyed. So, for example, 247 factories and 300 commercial centers were fully or partially destroyed. 62 mosques were completely destroyed, and 109 partially destroyed. 17,000 homes were destroyed, either completely or partially. The assault also targeted 9 water treatment stations. Again, like I said, they have people who live in Gaza, they have like huge problem with water and electricity, because every time these kind of attacks happen, Israel destroys, they make sure to destroy the infrastructure so they won't heal easily. And it moves on, for example, to 222 schools also were targeted. So a full 72% of all households in Gaza are meanwhile struggling with food insecurity. Again, we have the border issues. Nothing goes in, nothing goes out. So people can't even find enough food for the almost 2 million population over there. And unemployment rate became 44%, the highest on the world. So UN reports warn that Gaza could be uninhabitable by 2020. And this is how it looks like today. I will try to show you that quickly. This is a neighborhood called Shajaiya in Gaza. So this neighborhood was almost completely destroyed. Water crisis in Gaza again. So Gaza's main resource to get water is the aquifer water, but it is not. It's high in nitrogen and chloride, and makes 90 to 95% of Gazans the only source of getting water. The average water consumption per person is 70 to 90 liters. Again, it's below the average consumption per person. So in 2007, Israel has allowed almost no goods and construction materials into the Gaza Strip, making people not able to build another water network to solve the problem that they are facing. And in 2009, as many as 7% of Gazans didn't have running water. And even if they do have that, with the blackout of electricity, even if they do have that, it doesn't mean that they have steady water supply. So my friend that was granted the scholarship, that she's here, so one day she described how her day looked like. So she will be like, when I wake up, I have to check if we have water, and even if we have water, I have to also check if we have electricity to heat the water so I can take a bath. Sometimes there is no water, I can't take bath. And even if I want to make a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, I can't do that, because if we don't have water, then it's just hard to do it. And so she also described to me, like she was telling me, last day I was talking with my mom and over Skype, and she told me the phone or the laptop kept dropping. So she asked her mom what is happening. So her mom told her that we have no electricity, so we don't have any heating in the house, and it's so cold I can't even take my hand out of the blanket because it's freezing. So she told me, I can't even imagine how it felt like now that we have electricity now. Every building is heated here. I can't even remember how I used to live there without heat all the time. So another story that she told me, so she volunteered at one of the youth organizations here in the Twin Cities, and one of the activities is to take the kids camping. And she told me that the kids were really excited about that. They wanted to try like living the experience of not having water, not having electricity all the time. So she was like, oh, for me this is my life. I don't want to experience that again. So the supply and treatment of water rely on electricity. And like I said, the blackouts might last up to 18 hours a day. Sewage and wastewater treatment systems are also not so good over there. There are a lot of homes that are not connected to sewage system. Blast operation caused a lot of damage to Gaza. So this is the end of my presentation. I will leave it now for comments. If we finish early, then I can go back to the videos that I couldn't show you. But I'm sure you'll have some questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.